Twilight Garage podcast is brought to you by The Red Onion, the Bay Area's finest hamburgers, located at 11900 San Pablo Avenue in El Chorrito. Tell them Twilight Garage sent you.
Twilight, thank you so much for coming back in, spending the currency that is your life for the admission on this beautiful theatrical subject that has so far exclusively consisted of Manson family information and anything kind of having to do with the ancillary subject. My wonderful co-host, Mr. Casey Fields. How are you, sir?
Good to be here, man. Excited for another great show.
Excellent. And we are lucky enough with producer Alex here to have our new dear friend, Mr. Sam Smith, join us again. We're going to be talking today about some of the things that have always rubbed me funny about the early part of the Helter Skelter narrative in Vincent Bugliosi's book that we're really fleshing out right now. People are going to wonder, how many damn episodes can you do on this book? We're breaking it down sequentially. The reason why we're doing that is this show is loosely based on my co-host Casey's upcoming book, No Sense Makes Sense, that takes it in a very chronological order. So we're going to start with Sam today. Sam, welcome, sir.
Well, thank you, David and Casey.
Well, your research and the time you've spent on this case is much appreciated. And that's why we want to drag you out and really flesh out some of the things you started to discuss last time you were here on the show, which I thought were fascinating, Casey.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where do you want to start with this? Because I was gobsmacked.
Yeah, I think I'd really like to, land back on Kasabian and kind of hear Sam's thoughts on her and what does he think that was going on with Bob Melton, her husband, and Bob Kasabian and Charlie Melton, what they were doing prior to Linda joining the family, and then even after maybe. We know that Linda chased her husband down in New Mexico in August. And so I guess that Bob and Charlie had made it out there at some point. So I just excited to hear Sam's point of view.
How many kids did Linda have when she joined the family? She had one baby, or was it two?
Yeah, just one at the time. Tanya.
Just one at a time, huh?
Yep.
Oh. Well, I guess that the first thing that tells us is that Linda was kind of irresponsible,
And she was pregnant as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's traveling the country, rootless life, doesn't know where her next meal is coming from, doesn't have a home.
Doesn't have birth control, which was very much in vogue right then. It had just kind of come out where you could get it pretty easily. So she wasn't even on birth control as kind of a libertine, like you say. That's interesting. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, she's kind of a lost child, like so many of Manson's family members were. I don't know really what her background is. I know she had kind of a criminal record in drug sales and so forth. And she comes out here and she's traveling around with her husband, a guy named Melton, I think you said it was.
Yeah, her husband was Bob Kasabian, but Charlie Melton.
Bob Kasabian.
Yeah, Charlie Melton was a guy that was nicknamed Bible Charlie and Blackbeard Charlie. Yeah. He had a commune down there in Lower Topanga Canyon, what we know as the Snake Pit.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of cross-pollination due to baby Paul. He had known him up in Big Sur. It was believed that Charlie had met him on many occasions. Charles Manson, of course, we're speaking of, in relation to Charles Melton, well-known guy. So we'll sometimes flip-flop their names, Casey and I both, because I so closely associate those two. And my big question in this whole thing that I think hasn't been fleshed out, I think, the July 4th, big dramatic walk down the the boardwalk to meet Charlie. Make of that what you will. But the thing for me I think that's a big distraction that has bothered me, because the salient point that gets passed over a lot, and that I think you may understand more with what you were talking about last episode, is they were very sophisticated drug dealers, especially for the time, to be engaged in a smuggling and then retail operation on an international scale. I find that very interesting. Now, what is your take on that, Sam?
Well, are you saying that Melton and Kasabian were all involved in smuggling drugs? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they had a boat and they would make trips down to South America. And I don't know quite if I don't know if they were going to Colombia or what, but they were making trips up and delivering these drugs into the lower Topanga Canyon area. And so that could be it became a hot spot for a lot of people to come and get their drugs.
Absolutely, because they became the source. That's the thing that fascinates me. How did they go from understanding the potential of a drug market to not only exploiting it, but taking it above the next level of distributorship straight to importation? Again, that's a perilous journey. And the reason we were asking is, I'm kind of curious if they did have any help on that, because you've got to be a very courageous and confident sailor to undertake such journeys. Just to get the vessel down there is...
Yeah, you seem to know more than I do. I was under the impression that was just in the planning stages. They had planned to buy a boat and they had planned to sail down, to South America. I didn't know they actually went back and forth. Has that been confirmed?
Absolutely general story that has been circulated. And that's why I'm questioning it, because we have found out otherwise, that they actually did complete journeys, that they actually did have quite a bit of money. And if you think about the $5,000 amount that was stolen, allegedly, that's pretty interesting, because that's about $30,000.
Yeah, that's an enormous quantity of cash to be carrying around. Why didn't they use bank accounts or traveler's checks? It just seems to me a tremendous risk. Yeah.
And the other thing, this is what I wanted to ask you, Sam. So let's just say that was the case, and they did have this kind of financing behind them. They were very sophisticated. Why would they mess around with this kind of prison jerk, if we're going to look at him in the devil's advocate kind of way? Maybe he was a little charismatic. Maybe he had some broads around. Why would you attach your wagon to somebody who's financially having problems when you're a sophisticated, successful drug dealer? That's the thing I didn't understand.
Are you talking about Linda's attachment to the family, or?
Yeah, through Kasabian. I was wondering if Bob Kasabian, did you feel he maybe was like an agent provocateur, or maybe Charlie Melton or any of those people had some sort of government backing?
I see no signs of that.
Okay.
I mean, there could be, but I don't know. I think Linda left her husband and this other guy because Charlie was just so much more of an interesting figure. I didn't Lynette call him the complete man. I think she was just bowled over by Charlie's, total package.
Every woman
was willing to.
Yeah, every woman I've ever spoken to or heard refer to Charlie said the exact same thing, and that apparently when he made love, they all said the same thing about, he put you in the motion. And he used to say that, we put the girl in the motion, right? And that's what Lynn is not a lurid person. Lynette Fermi does not speak in these terms that people like, these very sexy terms. She's very humble, very homespun. But what she said was, when Charlie and her made love, it was just this ultimate satisfaction through and through, that he paid so much attention to you that it would bring you up and down and take you all these beautiful places, that it became, maybe even through breath work and other things that naturally happen with a good lover, it became spiritual.
Yeah, Charlie was pretty good, wasn't he? He had the same juju on all the girls.
Well, and they were all
Whatever.
different though. And what do you think? Do you think there was a genuine affection for him, or do you feel it was all manufactured by these MK Ultra type connections that you alluded to last time, Sam?
No, I think Charlie, he could be very loving, and that's what he gave to the girls. It wasn't all just exploitative. Charlie also produced what the girls wanted. The girls gave him what he wanted, and he gave them what they wanted. So it was, kind of a trade-off. It wasn't all negative.
Absolutely. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard this theory. I don't really believe it, but it's out there that Mary Brunner, having graduated from the University of Wisconsin, may have been some kind of like CIA handler. Now we know that Sidney Gottlieb and Jolly West also graduated from that university. And from what I've read is that it was almost like a recruiting ground for the CIA people that came out of there. But that theory is out there that Mary might have been some kind of like handler, or almost like a honeypot for Manson.
That's an interesting theory. But not everybody can be a CIA handler.
Yeah.
How old was Mary when she met Charlie? How old was she?
About 23, 24,
like,
yeah.
Yeah, they don't use kids for that stuff most of the time, as far as I know. So
The story is
maybe
that's why
Mary
it's
was
such a funny thing is that everybody apparently had some deep ties to something somewhere. It's like with Scientology. I felt that Sam, you were headed maybe in a Scientology direction with some of this, where you felt that Charlie had been contacted within the prison system. And I found that interesting. And can you expound on that? And when do you feel that started?
It must have started, I think, back in the late 50s, maybe at Terminal Island or something. At some point, Charlie was probably given a barrage of tests, psychological tests. And somebody realized that this guy, Charlie, he was kind of exceptional. His talents were such that, he had like 1 in a million type talents. And I think from that point on, somebody took him under his wing and started grooming Charlie for a future role.
There was actually a guy named Rainier Lamer, right? Or I'm saying it wrong. Lanier
Right,
Raymer.
Lanier.
Yeah, which was up at McNeil Island in Washington. I guess that they had a small group of inmates that were participating in Scientology sessions together, going through Dianetics and actually doing auditing on each other, which is wild.
Well, Charlie refers to that many times later as, I've tested clear. I'm clear. I'm clear. He would say that sometimes on these various broadcasts over the years. And what I'm working on personally, I don't know if it's going to be a book or what I'm going to turn it into, but there's a way for me to decode Charlie's messages as they are revealed through the media. And I'm really wanting to put some of that together. And I think some of it does dovetail with what you're saying, Sam, in a less obvious outsider nefarious way. But I'm guessing, this is my own projection, that Charlie was very open to any type of self-improvement, that he was very open to being given attention, that if someone found him attractive or would invest time in him, that he would very much avail himself to that, like unlike some others.
Yeah, I mean, he's in prison. He doesn't have any opportunities for, to be productive, but he is kind of ambitious. So he takes, like, he sponges up information from everybody he's around, from the other ex-cons, from whatever program they're pushing at the time. He's just a willing student,
That's what I got when we were talking last time, because the creepy carpus, these other people who he had put into a father figure role to cope with his lack of having a father. And I can really relate to that because I went some lonely decades without involvement from my father. And it's a hurtful, terrible place for a man to be. So I always took it like that Charlie was hungry for male role models, for any kind of attention and love from a male figure that he would respect. So he was looking for guideposts in the world. But then when you said somebody had noted his talents and that he was a 1 in a million type individual, now that brings me back to Sam. Who would do such a thing? Who would be trolling in prisons, giving these tests, these batteries of questions to inmates to sift out potential individuals, and for what purpose? So can you start there?
Yeah, probably the Bureau of Prisons was immediately involved. They were the ones, doing the selection, searching for talents within the prison population. Of course, behind them would probably be a group like the CIA. They wanted people who they could groom as agents or, people in the employ of the CIA. Mm-hmm. Prisoners would be an ideal population. They're very vulnerable. They're isolated. Oftentimes they have no family involvement. So you could take these guys and just turn them into your little puppets. And
they're just hoping to get they're just hoping to get a little bit of time knocked off their sentence, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Early out.
I didn't even think
early
about
out
that.
Of privileges. Yeah.
So if you cooperate or play the game or donate an organ or whatever, that's interesting. And here's the thing, whether or not you believe this is one of the interesting things about this case. No matter how you feel about it, there's something that's going to help your theory line up and buttress your point of view, even if it's something that's contrary to your whole point of view within this case. And that's why I just can't get enough coming back to it. Like, we're hoping to speak with Tom O'Neill at some time because I just love his dedication. I don't care what anybody thinks of that story. My thoughts of the story are completely irrelevant. Just the fact that this whole milieu grabbed him by the boo-boo. Gay dudes aren't usually excited about this type of thing. This very hetero, big dick energy. That's not what they get down with. And then for him to put so much time, energy, and like I say, whether you like what he said or not, that amount of work to me represents respect for the subject, whether we like the outcome or not. Do you know what I mean, Casey?
Yeah.
So I don't always have to like everything I read to appreciate it and to understand the work that went into it that allows me to have appreciation and hopefully a conversation with the author, in this case, Tom O'Neill.
Speaking about what we like to read, this last week I was actually reading one of your articles, Sam, on Manson blog, where you were talking about, you did a bunch of research into the black Muslims in prison.
Right.
Oh yeah. That was a very interesting link.
We touched on that last time. Thank you.
So these guys obviously were influencing Charlie or making Charlie aware of the coming race war.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie bases his whole helter-skelter hypothesis off what he learned from the black Muslims. I mean, what they were telling him, Charlie took as gospel. He thought it was real. He was absolutely sure the race war would start by the 1970s. So, his Charlie's theories weren't that crazy, really, from what he learned.
No, they really weren't. And I think during the trial, a defense attorney could have making the case that the race war was going on. You had the zebra murders going on, tons of civil strife with the Black Panthers. It definitely looked like it was flowing in that direction.
And for me, it was a real disservice to those on trial was that exact point that no one ever took the context of late 1969 Los Angeles into consideration in this conversation. If you're down with Helter Skelter, if you think it's rubbish, whatever your point of view is on how this thing has been presented throughout the media and these different books over the years aside, it really comes down to the culture of the time, and it can't be overstated. And that's where words fail. Like when we hear the Manson family and surviving Manson family members say the word love, I don't think you and I can get on that plane of direct communication and actual deep semantic meaning of the word love. It's a completely different thing because we don't have their context. So when you say something like, well, we need to take the culture of the times and the racial strife and all this stuff, that's a small sentence on a book. Whereas these young people, they were teenagers oftentimes, following a man who had a prison education, prison mentality, and was really, honestly, I think, trying to shed a lot of that. I don't think he wanted to carry that anger. I think when you've tried to lose hate in your life and then people bring you static like cops and stuff to Charlie, you double hate it. You double down on the violence. You double down on the protective nature. You double down on your hyper vigilant nature that was nurtured in prison. So you think about all these factors. And God bless America. We're not concentrating on the right words. So for you, Scientology, does that factor into your feeling of his manipulation behind bars? Do you think they used Scientology to harvest information from Charlie through the way he interacted with it?
Maybe not information.
I mean, about himself, like who he was as a player in their bigger game, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe not so much in Scientology. I think Scientology was just another group of ideas that Charlie sponged up of. He took certain things from Scientology that he liked, went with it, and he rejected other things.
So
I don't think Scientology.
Okay, that jives with the basic narrative we've always had. So you don't feel that Scientology was a part of this thing because you left us last time. Oh, buddy. Government recruitment through the prison system. Buddy, you tore my head off, friend. And I've been having to kind of warm up to this. Who approached who? So you think the government was like, hey, we might need some CIA super soldiers. What do you got? And then gave them a protocol to start looking and funded it?
Possibly. You know, right about the time that Charlie was coming up, the CIA started to outsource a lot of their more nefarious mind control programs into the cults. Yeah. They wanted an extra layer of protection between the research and the victims of their research. And if they could, if they could outsource that to the cults, anybody looking into it would stop at the cult and just think that was the cult's doing.
Great point.
So that is like Operation Midnight Hammer that we were talking about before, where the government got busted pulling certain nefarious activities like drugging cat house customers and different things because there wasn't that layer. That's brilliant.
Yeah, the first I had heard of that Operation Midnight Climax was in Boston. And then you're right on in the Haight-Ashbury area. Jolly West had set up one of these honeypot operations, right? And they did it a couple ways. One way was that they would bring in people, college students, and pay them to experiment with drugs and then record them from another room, get their reactions. Another way was they would send out women of the night in the bars to bring back executives to basically almost like an Epstein type operation. Like the women would have carnal knowledge with these fellows, and while they're smoking a cigarette afterwards or get a little high on something, they start to draw out information and blackmail these high level executives.
Absolutely. My dad talked about just military guys, like kind of nobodies you would think that got honeypotted like that in San Francisco around that time. And he never trusted anything because they dropped chemicals on San Francisco in the 50s when he lived there. And it was incredible. So this layer of protection you're talking about, Sam, it costs a bit more in the beginning, but what a great investment. Because if we look at it through that lens, it puts a great level of fascination on this story. And for us here, it's like going to the optician. I never mind looking through a lens. I haven't bought the glasses, but great God, it's interesting to look through. You don't have to agree with all of it. So they have now honeypotted a few individuals. The program is gaining some steam. They're outsourcing the dirty work. And you think about it, who would be involved in these things? Any greedy type person. And they've done it throughout Roman times and these other things, right? They find what you need. Is it an intoxicant? Is it a sexual deviance? What is it, right? So then they get in your thing, they exploit it. Now they have you. You're not going to want to lose your drugs or your financial standing or your fame or whatever they gave you as a musician or something, right? They'll just take you down. And that's a lot of the stories we're hearing in Hollywood now. So you feel some of that was happening to the players in this story as well. That's very, very timely. What do you think, Casey, with what's going on now? Do you think these stories kind of buttress what could have been happening back in?
I'm gonna hit on something you and I have already talked about kind of on air, but I want to ask Sam's opinion on it. Sam, do you think that the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic was a CIA funded operation?
Well, I think that's beyond dispute. I know in 1968, Michael Smith has acknowledged receiving money from the National Institute of Mental Health. You know, so they were, and which is a CIA front.
Absolutely.
So by 1968, at least, they were getting money from the CIA. And I strongly think that almost from the inception of the free clinic, that the government latched onto that project, probably funding it, you know, via foundations and anonymous contributions. Kind of
you're
untraceable.
100% right. One of the foundations I was looking into was called is still around. It's called the Bothene Foundation. They supply funds to organizations throughout the Bay Area. Another one is called the Merrill Trust.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. When I was a bike messenger, I delivered stuff for them. That's very interesting. So the thought for me being, when they get into this and they're harvesting these various individuals, we hear this. It sounds conspiratorial. It sounds kind of far out. But if we look again at the context, okay, we've got this government who's in charge, right? We've got LBJ, who's a rather paranoid individual. We found it just led into the whole culture that was Richard Nixon, that was this overbearing, overreaching, oligarchic exchange of power in our country. So we have these various elements that can be called nefarious government influence, whatever you want to say. We've got J. Edgar Hoover. We have all these now exposed, ugly, murderous, dirty players. But this sounds far out for some reason. That's what's interesting, is because the more we go back and put it together and thread this thing together, why wouldn't the government, as part of its intelligence gathering that happens throughout the world, try to figure out why even some of these politicians' children are smoking grass, experimenting with psychedelics, listening to certain types of music, and seem to be behaving in this kind of more uniform way. See, we were scared parents with messed up hair and coming home screaming punk rock songs and being high as hell. Well, that would get you in a mental institution in a suburban environment, and no one would think twice about it. They'd go, oh God, Margie had to do something. The kid had blue hair and a safety pin on his face. And it was the same back then. You come home in a prairie dress on acid talking about peace and love. You goddamn right the government's going to get involved if Patty Hearst and these other people are being sucked into this God knows what. Who's taking our children? What are these drugs? Is it a nefarious foreign operation designed to undermine the safety and security of the service personnel of this nation? Undermined with harbor leanings. That kind of shit.
It's also there's also a conspiracy out there that a lot of these rock stars of that era, their parents were involved
in the DOD,
the military industrial complex. Now, I understand that they're a generation that's coming off of World War II. And so a lot of them went straight from military into, weapons production, like Sandra's and Sandra Good's father, right? And other.
You got into aviation in a big way. And that's why it was such a large part of the Del Mar airport there in Del Mar, California. That's where a lot of Sandra's wealth was amassed. People make a big deal out of her being kind of an heiress, but
I'm thinking more specifically though, like the scenes from inside Laurel Canyon.
Yeah, that book
where they talk about like a lot of these Jim Morrison and
his dad being a rear admiral and these different things. They make much of it because what they're trying to say is that the military industrial complex used their children to basically idle a generation of kids so that they continue their stranglehold on power. They didn't want these lefties taken over. So it was either one path or the other. The good kids were going to be part of the military, part of the family money, and carry on the traditions of the Bohemian Grove and the Knights Templar and all things Christian. Or you were going to be an idled, race-mixing, Jew-loving, music industry druggy pile. And that's kind of what the theories are, is that they wanted to get rid of these lefties by stalling a generation of kids. And then the counteraction of that is the thing that we were just talking about, which is them studying this same generation of idled kids to try to understand, are these foreign operatives that have come into our country with this weird philosophy, the Maharishi and these other people coming in to brain deaden our kids? It's just like TikTok being a Chinese intelligence gathering on operation.
So try to unpack that for us, Sam.
Please.
Well, you're talking about McGowan's weird scenes inside the canyon book, right?
Absolutely, which is right here.
Yeah, I think that might have some partial relevance. I don't know that theory has ever caught on, though. I mean, some people kind of advocate for it, but it's got a lot of detractors, too.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that true?
Yeah. What do you think?
A lot of moving parts.
Yeah. I don't really. It's just speculation. It's hard to really base a theory on that. I don't really know if I believe that, because there's a lot of rock and rollers, probably most of them, whose dads were not in the government,
Yeah, I really like what Timothy Leary said later on. He said the CIA started the counterculture movement and they ended it.
That's interesting, because he wrote along with a lot of that.
Yeah, I guess, and it is, maybe not coincidental that the kind of music that the Laurel Canyon musicians were doing was not at all radical.
Mm-hmm.
They went from real protest songs to a peaceful, easy feeling. So heck, was led by the consumer demand at the time, or did that music come first, and then the public was kind of, was foisted on them later?
Mm-hmm.
So the James
I don't know.
Taylors and the
Jackson Browns
That's
and the Linda
very-
Ronstadts.
the Eagles, the Linda Ronstadts, like you say, and then Neil
Yeah.
Young coming down. Yeah, that whole
Yeah.
I call it the corduroy effect. They all just like kind of went like they're wearing brown cords or something. They're like, hey man,
Mhm.
feeling a
Yeah,
certain
but
amount
it
of
is
way.
true. Yeah, and by the early 70s, the music had changed.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of more tranquilizing than it was uplifting and inspiring.
And
Yeah.
militant.
That's just my take on.
No, because even the funk had gotten militant right then. You had Sly and the Family Stone. You had all these different people with these black man up messages, like this effervescent black message, which wasn't necessarily a threat to white people or whatever, but there was a big change. People were kind of coming together. It reminded me of the late 80s with things like Rick Rubin navigating the Beastie Boys, for example. And then you've got this marriage of hip hop,
Yeah.
pro-black politics, melding with rock and roll, white culture, white teenagers in the form of Public Enemy. When I heard that in the late 80s, boy, I was excited because I was coming from rock and roll. The Beastie Boys didn't do a lot for me initially, but man, I got a hold of those Public Enemy records and they just felt like a punk rock show in a record album. I couldn't believe the rebellion, the talking back. Screw the government. I see through you. This is all a conspiracy. I'm the man. Forget you. Put this down for the record. Like, wow, this isn't his story. His story.
For me, I'm a little bit younger, but it was Rage Against the Machine, right?
Very similar,
which now
kind of message.
I would describe as Rage for the Machine. They became almost like Uniparty, like totally opposite of their message now.
Yeah, they're such sellout creeps, man. That guy, Zach De La Roca, like get a couple singing lessons. That guitar player, just play like Wes Borland, like a normal guitar dude. Just get a DJ. Don't be so cheap. It's an art and a craft. There's nothing wrong with having a Filipino on the stage. You could just go over to Qbert, get somebody real. You got the money, babe.
So, like always, Sam, we drifted quite a far off topic on this one. We're going to wrap up this episode pretty soon, but I kind of wanted to get your final thoughts on, just the CIA or whatever you want to expound upon.
Well, I think the CIA is definitely involved in the public entertainment. We were talking about rap earlier, and the early rap turned into like gangster rap after a couple years. And there have been rappers that have come forth telling us that they were encouraged by the record companies to do this anti-social gangster rap type stuff.
Because of their,
and
it's interesting because I've heard a lot of people finally come out. It was around the same time. So people are like, well, why would that happen? These people were quiet for so long. Why would they say it all at once? Well, they had signed these NDAs that were very binding because the people that were given in this presentation were record label owners and investors and actual representatives from private prison organizations. Talk about outsourcing your dirty work, who came together to boost their investment, to encourage record executives, to encourage rappers to invest in privatized prisons throughout the country, and then keep the message gangster so that they had a steady clientele. I think that's an excellent point, and we're going to leave you with that, Sam. Buddy, would you come back one more? Do it to me one more time. Would you come back?
Sure, Dave. Anytime, man.
All right, we're going to
I'll
get
be
back with you, Sam. Twilighters, as always, peace, respect to the victims' families, the survivors. We're so glad you joined us.